The invitation no human ever expected. Captain Elias stood still at the edge of the royal garden, his boots sinking softly into the glowing blue grass of planet Zitha. The air was thick with the sweet scent of alien flowers, and the sky above shimmered like liquid glass. The royal palace in front of him looked like a floating crystal, hanging between night and light. Behind him stood two tall guards, their faces hidden behind masks shaped like wolves, their glowing spears buzzing quietly in the silence. Elias had never been this deep into Zithari territory before, let alone inside the palace of their queen. This was supposed to be a simple diplomatic visit, shake hands, smile, say some words about peace, and return to Earth. But now everything felt strange. He was led into a silver hall where the walls shimmered with energy pulses. Like breathing light, every few steps strange symbols glowed under his feet, each one reacting to his presence. The guard stopped in front of a tall golden door and stepped aside. Elias hesitated, unsure if this was still part of the planned ceremony. Then the door opened on its own, and he walked in. Slowly inside was a large chamber filled with soft silver light and floating lanterns that drifted in the air like stars. The ceiling seemed to move like water, and in the center of the room was a large oval bed made of living vines and soft crystals. Lying on it was her Queen Valera of the Zithari Empire, known across galaxies for her cold heart and strict rule. She looked directly at him, her eyes glowing faintly, her long silver hair floating around her shoulders like smoke. She was young, not like the old leaders Elias had expected, young and beautiful, but something in her face held great sadness. "You are Elias," she said, her voice soft like wind through ice. "I have read your records." She sat up slowly, her dress changing color as she moved. It flowed like liquid. Her bare feet touched the floor, and Elias froze, unsure if he should kneel or salute or simply run. The queen walked toward him and stopped just an inch away. "You have seen war," she said, her fingers brushing a scar on his face, "and you have survived without becoming hollow." "I need that," she whispered. Elias didn't know what to say. All the training in the world could not prepare a human for a moment like this. The queen reached out and took his hand gently, her fingers cool but firm, and led him to the bed. Not in a way that felt romantic or threatening, just quiet, like someone asking not to be alone tonight. The vines shifted and made space for them. The queen sat down and looked up at him again, her voice low and tired. "Sleep here beside me," she said softly. "I will hug you all night. I do not wish to dream alone again." Blinked, unsure if this was a royal test or a trap, or some strange alien tradition, but the way she looked at him made something stir inside his chest. Her loneliness felt heavy, like gravity, stronger than rules, or rank stronger than fear. He slowly nodded and sat beside her, the vines wrapped gently around them, forming a soft cocoon. The queen moved closer, her arms wrapping around him carefully, as if he might break. She rested her head near his shoulder, and for the first time in his life, Elias didn't feel like a soldier. He felt human outside the chamber. The guards looked at each other in silence. No one had ever been invited to sleep in the queen's private chamber, not even her own people. To them this was more than forbidden. It was impossible, and yet it was happening inside the cocoon of light. Elias tried to stay awake, but her calm breathing and the soft pulsing warmth of the vines made his eyes grow heavy. Just before sleep took him, he heard her whisper again, "You are not like the others. Please do not leave when morning comes." Somewhere deep in the palace, hidden behind walls of glass, and thought a set of eyes watched them through a secret mirror filled with rage and jealousy. A plan was already forming to make sure this union never survived the night, but, for now, under alien stars, a human and a queen lay close, not as enemies or strangers, but as two beings who had finally found peace in a galaxy that had forgotten how to give it. Her touch burned like memory. When Elias opened his eyes, the soft silver glow of the room was still there, but it felt warmer, like it had wrapped around him. During the night he realized the queen's arm was still resting on his chest, and her head was gently pressed near his neck, her breath slow and steady, her fingers curled into the fabric of his uniform, as if even in sleep she was afraid he might disappear. He didn't move, not because he was afraid of disrespecting her, but because he could feel how fragile the moment was, like crystal floating in mid-air. One wrong move, and it would shatter. She stirred slowly, her eyes fluttering open, and for a brief second, Elias saw something in her gaze that startled him. It wasn't power or command, it was softness, and something close to fear, as if she was unsure whether this moment was real or just a dream. Her hand moved, slightly brushing across the scar on his neck, and then sliding down to his palm. She didn't pull away, instead she closed her eyes again, and whispered something in her language too soft for him to understand, but it made the vines around the bed glow for a second last. Night wasn't normal for her. Elias knew that without asking, she had broken rules he hadn't even known existed. And yet she didn't regret it. She finally sat up, her dress rewrapping itself into something more formal as she moved her eyes. Now watching him carefully, as if checking to see if he had changed, she finally spoke again, her voice low and controlled. I have never slept without waking from terror, until now, not since I was a child. Elias nodded slowly, unsure what to say because, how do you reply when a queen admits something that raw, something not even her closest people knew? You gave me peace, she said simply, as if the words themselves were hard to say. Then she stood and walked to the open wall. The sunrise of Zitha, rising beyond the floating city's edge, turning the sky into waves of pink and violet. He followed her quietly, watching. As the queen reached out and touched a glowing panel on the wall, a soft hum filled the room, and suddenly, a projection of Zitha's vast empire appeared around them, her eyes focused on the image of a border planet lit in red conflict again. Elias asked, his voice still quiet. She nodded. The border people are tired of my rule. They believe I have grown weak, because I speak of peace, instead of destruction. Elias folded his arms, thinking carefully, before answering. Maybe they're scared because peace means change, and change means losing power, and fear always makes people violent. She turned to him slowly, studying him like he was something rare. You understand more than most leaders I have met, she said, then her gaze softened again. She stepped closer, closer than before, her fingers rising to gently press against his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady. Your heart is louder than your words, she said, and then her fingers glowed, a soft blue light spread from her touch. Elias gasped slightly, not in pain, but in something strange. It was like fire and memory mixed together, his mind filled with flashes. Not his own, a cold bed, a screaming child, a royal crown that felt like a chain around her throat. She pulled away. Quickly, I am sorry, she whispered. I did not mean to show you that it is a Zithari bond touch, a sacred thing. I should not have used it, but I wanted to know what made your eyes so quiet and calm in a world like this. Elias touched his chest, where the glow had faded. I saw your pain, he said softly. She looked down, shame in her eyes. It was not meant for humans, but maybe it was always meant for someone who could understand me without words. She looked back at him now, stronger, like a queen again. I cannot hide this bond now. Someone will have felt it across the palace before. Elias could speak. A guard rushed in, face pale, eyes wide. Your Majesty, the High General has arrived early, and he demands to see you now. He knows the bond has been triggered. Elias stepped forward. Do I stay or go? She looked at him, her decision clear as light. Stay, she said quietly, but firmly. Stand with me now, or they will try to erase you like a mistake from history. The queen turned, walking out of the chamber with her head high, and Elias followed her steps steady, no longer just a guest. He didn't know what the day would bring, but he knew something had already changed between them, something alive, something dangerous and beautiful, all at once as they entered. The throne hall, eyes turned, whispers spread like wind through leaves, and standing at the end of the hall was General Crava, his armor sharp, his face cold, and behind his back his hand rested on the hilt of a ceremonial blade. He did not bow, he did not smile, he simply stared at Elias with eyes that promised only one thing. You are not welcome here. The royal guard's warning. General Crava stood like a statue of stone, his armor gleaming under the light of the throne hall, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on Elias, as if the very sight of a human inside the royal court was poison. The queen stepped forward, her voice calm, but filled with quiet thunder. General, why have you come before the scheduled war council? Her tone was smooth, but everyone in the room could feel the shift like a storm forming. In still air, the general did not bow, he did not kneel, he only spoke in a voice that cracked through the silence like a blade. Your Majesty, the bond alert reached the command post. Someone has touched your core. Someone has triggered the Zithari tie, the only kind that should be reserved for your future mate, and I find it strange that at the same moment this human is seen walking from your chambers. The queen did not flinch, her expression unreadable. She stepped aside, showing Elias standing just behind her. She did not hide him, she did not deny him, and the silence in the court grew heavier with each heartbeat. Elias knew he was in danger, not from weapons, but from tradition, from ancient rules, written in the bones of this empire, rules that said he should not be here. Rules that said he should already be gone. Crava stepped forward and pointed a finger at Elias, his voice rising with each word. You are not one of us, and yet you touched our queen. You let her bond to you, you let her sleep beside you like you were her equal. What gave you the right, human? What gave you the right to enter where no warrior has ever stood? Elias did not raise his voice, he did not reach for his weapon. He only looked at the queen, then back at Crava, and said quietly, she invited me, I did not force her, I did not plan this, I only stayed because she asked me to, and I would do it again, if she needed me. Gasps moved through the court like wind through dry leaves. Crava's face turned red with fury, and he took a step closer, his hand now gripping the hilt of his blade. "You disgrace our customs with your presence," he said coldly, and then he looked at the queen, almost pleading with her. "Your Majesty, you must break the bond now. Reject him before it is too late, before the council forces our hand and declares you unfit to rule." The queen turned, her eyes glowing faintly, as she walked past Elias toward the center of the court. She looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of every noble, every elder, every soldier who dared to judge her. In silence she raised her voice, and it echoed like music through the great hall. "I have ruled this empire for 30 cycles. I have won battles. I have held peace, and I have survived betrayals and poisons and threats that none of you could imagine. And in all those years, none of you gave me rest, none of you gave me peace until now." She looked back at Elias, her voice softer but firm. "This human brought me peace. He brought me sleep without fear, and for the first time in my life I felt safe in my own chambers. That is something no crown has given me, no blade, no army, and no law." The court trembled with quiet rage and confusion. Crava's jaw clenched, but he did not speak. He could see the queen had already made a choice, but he would not give up, not now. He stepped back, and bowed just enough to remain respectful, then turned and walked away, his cloak dragging behind him like a dark shadow. Elias breathed slowly, his heart pounding, but his eyes stayed on the queen. She turned to him once more and said softly, "You have made enemies today, but you have also made something far stronger than fear, and if you stay, you must be ready to defend that something with your life." He nodded once. "I already made that choice when I stepped into your chamber." Later that night, Elias sat alone on the balcony of the guest wing, the stars above Zither looked strange and beautiful, like broken mirrors reflecting unknown truths. He heard soft steps behind him, and turned to see her again, this time not in royal dress, but a simple robe of night blue, her hair loose, her crown gone. She sat beside him without a word, and looked at the stars with him. "You must be careful," she whispered. "Crava will not stop. Others will try to break what we are forming, and they will use fear and lies to turn this world against you." Against you. Silius looked at her, then back at the sky. "I am not afraid of fear," he said. "I have seen it before. It just hides behind uniforms and loud voices." The queen smiled for the first time, not out of pride, but something close to hope, and then without a word, she rested her head on his shoulder again, her fingers curling around his hand like a memory she never wanted to lose. And far below the palace, deep in a secret hall, met with figures cloaked in shadow, his voice cold and sharp. "If she will not listen, then we must act before the bond becomes permanent, and the crown becomes worthless." An assassin in the shadows. The wind outside the palace turned cold as night fell over the floating capital of Zither. Lights dimmed in the great towers, and soft humming vibrations echoed through the walls like distant drums warning of unrest. Elias stood in the queen's personal garden, a place where no foreigner had ever stepped. Before the glowing flowers moved gently with the breeze, and each petal shimmered like stardust, but his mind was not at peace. He could feel the tension growing like a storm. Beneath the calm sky, he looked toward the queen's window, above where her figure could barely be seen, standing still like a statue, watching the city below her. People did not understand her, and many in the palace now whispered her name with fear, not because she had done wrong, but because she had chosen to open her heart to someone from another world, someone who did not fit their old stories or their ancient bloodlines. Elias turned as he heard soft footsteps approaching. It was Malin, one of the royal attendants, her eyes wide with worry, her voice low and rushed. "Captain," she said quickly. The outer senses detected movement near the queen's chambers, something cloaked, something fast. Elias did not wait. He ran through the glowing corridors, his boots echoing on the polished floors, every muscle tight, every step burning with purpose. As he reached the top-level, guards stood confused, checking devices that showed nothing but static. Someone had masked their signal using forbidden techie. Didn't ask for permission. He pushed through the doors into the queen's private hall, and what he saw froze the breath in his chest. The queen stood near her bed, unaware. Behind her a dark figure moved through the shadows, low, silent, and armed with twin blades. The intruder was wrapped in stealth fabric, nearly invisible to the eye. Only the soft flicker of light on metal betrayed their presence. Elias shouted a warning, and dove forward. Just as the assassin leaped toward her, the queen turned too late. The first blade struck, but not her. Elias had thrown himself between them. Pain shot through his side, as steel tore flesh, and blood spilled across the crystal floor. The queen screamed something ancient and powerful, her voice breaking through the walls like thunder. The vines around the room reacted, violently lashing out and grabbing the assassin by the arms, pinning them to the ceiling. The stealth cloak fell away, revealing the attacker's face. Elias stared in shock. It was one of the palace guards, a face he had seen at morning briefings. someone who had once bowed before the queen. His mouth bled as he smiled and hissed. "You are killing our people with your weakness," he said to the queen. "You chose a human over your own race." The queen walked forward, her hands trembling, not with fear but rage, her eyes glowing like twin moons. "You broke your oath," she said softly, "and now you will answer to the crown." The vines tightened and snapped bone as the assassin screamed, the sound cut short by a sharp motion from the queen's hand, then silence. The room held its breath, the vines slowly pulled back, and the shattered body fell limp to the floor. Elias dropped to one knee, blood staining his side, but his eyes still locked on hers. The queen rushed to him, dropping beside him, her hands glowing. As she tried to heal the wound, her voice shaking, "Stay with me, stay awake please, do not leave me now." Her fingers pressed into his skin, glowing deeper, trying to close the bleeding. It worked only a little, he was still losing blood. "You are safe," he whispered, breathing hard. She nodded, holding his face gently, like he was something sacred. Her forehead touched his, and she whispered something old, something in her language he didn't understand, but felt deep in his bones. Gods burst in moments. Later, weapons raised, but froze, as they saw the queen holding Elias protectively, her eyes warning them not to come closer. She looked at them all, and said clearly, "There has been an attack from within, and I will find who sent him. I do not care what rank or blood they carry, they will fall later." As Elias lay in the healing chamber's machines, humming softly around him, the queen sat beside him, never moving from his side, her hand resting over his chest, as if her touch alone kept his heart steady. She spoke little, but her silence was louder than speeches, and her gaze sharper than any blade. Far beneath the palace, in a chamber lined with ancient stone, General Crava knelt before a circle of cloaked figures. The council of shadow voices murmured, and eyes gleamed with cold fire. "You failed," said one. "The queen lives, and the bond strengthens with every breath he takes beside her." Crava clenched his fist, then let it go. "I will not fail again. The next time she will not have time to scream." But in her private chamber, the queen knew the truth. Now the attack was only the beginning, and trust would be hard to find in the days to come. Yet still, she whispered to Elias, even as he slept, bruised and broken, "I will not let them take you from me. Not now, not ever." His trial before the crown, the chamber of judgment, was colder than any place Elias had seen on Zitha. The walls were made of smooth black stone that hummed with old power, and the air tasted like dust and fire. He stood in the center of a wide circle, surrounded by nobles, soldiers, and council members, each dressed in heavy robes and tall crowns of bone and crystal. Their faces were hidden by masks carved with ancient symbols. Only their eyes were visible, and those eyes burned with silent fury and fear. At the top of the hall, the queen sat on her throne, but this time she wore no crown, no golden robe, no soft expression. Her face was unreadable, her back straight, her voice locked behind silence. Elias could not read her now, and for the first time since arriving on this world, he felt truly alone. He had been summoned, not as a guest, but as an accused, and the voices around him were sharp and cold, like knives dressed in silk. "He stands before us, after spilling blood in the queen's chamber," one voice said, "and though he claims it was to save her, we all know the danger of bonding with an outsider." Another voice snapped, "His presence has already fractured our order. Our traditions are not built to carry humans. Our queen has been poisoned by emotion and weakness." Elias stood still. He didn't speak. He let their words fall like hailstones on his shoulders. He looked up at the queen once, hoping for a glance, a sign, anything, but she did not move. She was trapped, just like him, in a storm she never asked for, and perhaps no longer controlled. Then General Crava stepped into the light, his armor polished, his voice calm but filled with venom. "The queen is beloved and sacred, but her judgment has been clouded by this man, by his presence and the bond he triggered. She sleeps less, she eats less, she is losing the strength that once made her feared by our enemies and respected by our ancestors. This human may not have used a weapon, but his influence is just as deadly." The room stirred, and whispers turned into arguments. The queen remained silent. Elias finally raised his voice, not in anger, but with a steady quiet that made the room pause. "I did not come here to steal power or poison your queen. I came here because I believed peace was possible between our worlds. I stayed because she asked me, and I protected her because no one else did. When the blade was raised against her, I stood in the way, not because I am brave, but because I could not let her bleed." A long silence followed, and then slowly a soft voice rose, not from the crowd but from the throne. The queen stood, her eyes glowing faintly, her voice firm and steady. "I have listened, and I have heard every word you spoke. I see your fear and your pride, but I do not see your loyalty, because if you loved this empire as much as you claim, you would have protected me when danger walked through your own ranks. It was not your laws or your swords that saved me. It was this human who bled for me." Gasps filled the chamber, and Crava's fists tightened, but the queen was not finished. I did not lose strength, I found something I never knew. I was allowed to feel safety, warmth, the ability to sleep without fear of shadows in my room, or poison in my cup, and if that makes me weak, then perhaps we have worshipped the wrong kind of strength for too long. She walked down from her throne, each step ringing like thunder, her gaze locked on Elias. She took his hand and raised it before the court. This is not a stranger. This is not a curse. This is my bond, and I will not break it for your comfort, or your old rules. Crava stepped forward, his voice now trembling with rage. Then you are no longer fit to rule, and we will not follow you into ruin. The queen turned to him slowly. If you wish to challenge the crown, then you know the path. Take up your blade and face me in the arena, or leave this court in silence. Forever Crova hesitated. Just for a breath, but it was enough. The council turned, watching, waiting, and then he stepped back, the challenge unspoken, the thread broken. For now the queen turned to Elias, her voice soft again, but filled with fire. I chose you not for your blood, but for your heart, and I will not let this court or any blade take that away from me. As the stars rose above the palace, Elias and the queen stood alone in the garden. Once more she reached for his hand, and this time it was not trembling. This time it was steady and sure, and as the wind passed through the glowing trees above, she whispered, they will come for us again, but now they know I will not stand alone. The night of no moons, the sky above Zither turned black as the twin moons vanished behind thick clouds of shadow. The ancient watchers said it was an omen, a night of silence, a night when the stars refused to speak, and the winds carried the scent of betrayal through the palace towers. No bells rang, no guards laughed, no candles flickered, only darkness wrapped itself around the floating city like a snake, waiting to strike. Inside the queen's chamber, Elias stood by the window, his hand resting on the frame as he looked into the void. Where stars once danced, the queen sat behind him, her fingers tracing a glowing map on the floor, marking positions of loyal soldiers, hidden tunnels and secret passageways. Her face was calm, but her shoulders carried weight heavier than armor. They both knew something was coming, something bigger than whispers, an angry council vote, something that would not be stopped by words or traditions. The queen looked up at Elias, her voice low and steady. Tonight they will come, not as rebels, but as shadows. They will try to make it look like an accident, like I simply disappeared, and no one will speak of it again. If they succeed, this empire will fall into blood and fear, and no one will protect the people from what comes after. Not even Crevelius turned and nodded without hesitation. I will stay by your side, no matter what. I made my choice when I took your hand before the court, and I will not walk away when the night turns cold. The queen stood and moved toward him, her robe shifting into armor made of living silver vines that wrapped around her like a second skin. She looked like a warrior carved from moonlight, her eyes soft but burning with fire. She placed her hand on his chest again, feeling the rhythm of his heart, then reached behind her and handed him a blade forged from crystal and starlight, one of the oldest royal weapons ever made. This is not for show, she said. This blade chooses only those who stand for life, not power. If it rejects you, it will shatter. Elias took the blade and felt its weight settle in his hand, not heavy but alive. It hummed quietly, as if speaking to him, and it did not break. The queen smiled a rare and quiet smile, and they waited. The attack came without warning, no horns, no alarms. Only the sudden scream of breaking glass as the sky window above them shattered, and a team of masked warriors dropped through. Dressed in black armor, without royal crest, they moved like shadows with glowing blades and eyes full of fury. They did not speak. They simply attacked. Elias moved fast, blocking the first strike with the crystal blade and pushing the attacker back. His body burned from old wounds, but his mind was clear. He was no longer just a soldier, he was her shield. The queen fought beside him, her vines lashing out, her hands glowing with fire and light. She moved like poetry and death, all in one each step. A promise, each strike a command. But there were too many enemies, and more poured into the room. Through hidden doors, through walls that should have been sealed, even the floor opened, to release assassins from the deep tunnels below. Elias took a blow to the shoulder, and fell to one knee, blood rushing from the wound, but he did not let go of the blade. He rose again, and slashed through the darkness. The queen shouted his name, and leaped across the room to protect him, taking a strike meant for his back. The blade cut through her armor, and she stumbled to her knees, hitting the ground, her blood glowing softly as it spilled across the crystal floor. Elias screamed and rushed to her side, blocking the next attack with his bare arm, then turning and driving the blade into the chest of the enemy. The vines around the chamber came alive, reacting to the queen's pain. They wrapped around the intruders, crushing them, pulling them into the walls, where they vanished in silence. But the damage was done. The queen lay in Ilias's arms, her breathing shallow, her hands cold. He pressed his hand to her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," he whispered again and again. "You told me not to leave you now. I asked the same. Please, stay." Her eyes opened barely, her lips forming the words, "Not yet." I will not let them win. Her fingers reached up and touched his face, her blood leaving marks like stars across his cheek. Outside, the palace explosions shook the towers. The rebel forces had begun their full attack. Crava had unleashed his final hand, and the loyal guards were outnumbered. Elias stood slowly, lifting the queen in his arms and looking at the burning city below. This is war, then we fight not for thrones but for each other, he whispered, and the blade in his hand pulsed in agreement. She hugged him one last time. Or, forever. The royal palace burned beneath the dark sky as rebel ships circled above like hungry vultures, ready to tear apart everything once sacred. The queen's breath was faint in Elias's arms, her blood still glowing against his skin as he carried her through the collapsing halls. His body pushed forward by will, not strength. Every step felt like lifting mountains, but he did not stop, not when fire rained from the ceiling, not when soldiers shouted behind him, not even when his own legs began to shake from pain and exhaustion. She was still alive. He could feel it, her heartbeat soft but steady, her eyes closing and opening like flickering lights. Trying not to fade, he spoke to her, constantly whispering old earth stories, telling her about rivers and skies and wind that smelled like rain, and she smiled weakly each time he did, as if his words held the power to keep her tethered to this world. Guards still loyal to the crown met him near the eastern tower. Their eyes widened at the sight of the wounded queen, but they cleared a path and guided him down into the ancient vaults, where the air was cooler and the walls were lined with glowing stones, set to hold the memories of past rulers. They laid her on the healing table, and the vines from the walls moved in carefully, wrapping around her body, humming as they began to work, glowing gently with the last strength of the planets. Corellius stood beside her, blade in hand, watching as Crava's forces pushed deeper into the palace, echoes of battle rising above like distant thunder. He knew this was their final stand. The council had fallen, the outer towers were gone, and the skies were black with war, but he did not feel fear, only the ache of helplessness, watching her lie so still, her face pale, her lips parted, as if calling his name in dreams. The queen opened her eyes slowly, her voice no louder than breath. I am still here because of you, and if I live, it will be because of your heart, not your blade. You gave me more than safety, Elias. You gave me warmth in a world that forgot how to feel. He knelt beside her, holding her hand, pressing it to his face, and whispering, you will live, and you will rise, and I will stay with you, even if the stars fall and time ends. I am not leaving youth. Healing vines glowed brighter, pulsing with her heartbeat as her strength returned, little by little, and she sat up slowly, her eyes burning again with purpose and light. She looked at the guards around them and said clearly, bring me my crown outside the chamber. Crava stood in the throne room surrounded by his loyalists, the old crown of bone in his hand, his voice declaring the queen's fall and his rise to the seat of power. But before the words could finish, the great doors of the hall opened and silence fell. She entered, not carried, not held, but walking, her steps slow but sure, her armor once broken now whole, her crown of stars returned to her brow, and behind her, Elias walked, his blade drawn, his body wrapped in blood and ash, but his eyes steady and strong. The crowd parted like waves before her. No one dared speak as she stepped onto the throne platform and faced Crava, her voice sharp and calm. You betrayed your oath, you drew blood in sacred space, you struck against your queen and called it duty, and now I call it treason. Crava sneered and raised his blade, but before he could swing, she moved faster, her hand raised glowing with power that cracked the air itself. The blast struck him like a storm, sending him across the hall, crashing into the stone wall where he fell and did not rise. The queen looked out at the remaining soldiers and nobles, her voice echoing across the marble. We are done with fear. We are done with ancient chains today. We begin something new, and this man beside me, this human, this heart, has shown us the way. She reached for Ilias's hand and pulled him forward before the people of Zitha. She placed her crown upon her head, and then placed a second mark, glowing blue, onto Ilias's chest, not as a king, not as a ruler, but as her bond, her equal, her chosen heart. That night the fires faded, the skies cleared, and the moons returned, their light falling gently upon the palace towers, and in the quiet that followed, the queen stood on the balcony, with Elias beside her, their fingers interlocked as she whispered to him, they feared love, because they never understood its power, but we have changed that, and no matter what the stars say, I will always hold you. When darkness comes, Elias looked at her, and smiled a tired smile full of truth, and said softly, I will always stay, not as a hero, not as a warrior, but as the man who will never let you fall alone. And under the twin moons of Zitha, she hugged him once more, not as a royal, not as a ruler, but as someone who had finally found the place where her soul could rest. And that hug was not a goodbye, it was a beginning.